Welcome to my podcast. I'm Christine Schultheis, intuitive coach and constellation facilitator. And in this podcast, I invite you to join me on a journey into the world of constellation work. I share my personal experiences, touching moments from my practice, and the unseen connections that deeply shape our lives. Some questions cannot be answered by the mind, and yet somewhere an answer is waiting for us, beyond thinking, in the space where we meet ourselves again. That's exactly where this podcast will take you, step by step, story by story. I'm glad you're here. Episode 5: Success: Why we sometimes stand in our own way. Hello and welcome back. Today's episode is all about success. We live in a society that teaches us if we just work hard enough, success will eventually follow. And if it doesn't, we tend to believe that we simply didn't try hard enough. So we push ourselves even more. We improve our marketing, take the next course, work on our mindset, or try to fix ourselves by working even harder. There are many logical explanations the mind offers for why success doesn't happen. But what if the real answer lies on an entirely different level, on the systemic level? What if it's not a lack of effort that holds us back, but invisible bonds and loyalty in our family system that prevents us from allowing success? Today, I want to share 3 examples from my work that show exactly this. The first example is a singer. She had a beautiful voice and had already released several albums. Her music touched people deeply, not just me, but everyone who listened to her songs. And yet, the financial success she hoped for never came. In her constellation, it became clear that she didn't allow herself to be successful because she was unconsciously connected with the fate of her grandmother. Her grandmother once gave up a highly coveted spot at a prestigious university, where she planned to study literature, all for the sake of her family. Despite her talent and passion, she chose not to follow her own path. My client, whose true calling was singing, carried this unconscious loyalty within her. If my grandmother wasn't allowed to live her gift, I cannot become more successful than she was. Out of love and a longing to belong, she turned away from success, almost as if saying, shared suffering is easier to bear. It was only when she truly saw her grandmother's sacrifice in her constellation and said inwardly, so that your sacrifice was not in vain, I now allow myself to be successful with my calling, that a deep blockage dissolved. For the first time, she could look at success and take a step toward it. The second example is a man who simply couldn't move forward in his business. No matter how hard he worked, whenever a project was about to be completed, it collapsed at the very last moment. Every time, without any visible reason. In his constellation, it became clear that he was deeply connected to a sense of guilt in his family. His grandfather had built his wealth during World War II on the suffering of others, on the suffering of people persecuted by the regime at that time. Unconsciously, my client carried a connection to the victims, as if he wanted to restore their dignity by sacrificing his own success. It was as though he was saying inside, if you lost everything, I am not allowed to win. Only when the victims were seen and honored in the constellation and the guilt could be returned to where it belonged, did movement come into the system. With the inner sentence, in remembrance of you, and so that your suffering was not in vain, I now allow myself to be successful. A space for reconciliation opened. Success could now flow, not as compensation, but as an expression of life itself. The third example is a man whose ancestors lost everything during World War II. They had to flee and leave everything behind: their house, their possessions, their roots, even their language. They stood before nothing. In the family, nobody ever spoke about this time again, but the feeling of loss remained, and it was passed down through the generations. In the constellation, it became clear that the grandson, my client, was unconsciously continuing this story. He would build something up and lose it again. New opportunities appeared and slipped through his fingers, as if he wasn't allowed to have more than what his ancestors were able to keep back then. Inside him, the loyalty was strong. If you lost everything, I must stay loyal to you by remaining in lack. When he was finally able to feel this in the constellation, the pain, the helplessness, the grief of his ancestors, and at the same time see their strength and their will to survive, something shifted. He said inwardly, I honor your fate, and I take the life that has come to me through you. I am allowed to have, I am allowed to be successful. In that moment, peace arose, and this man could finally receive the richness of life in all its forms. Success is an inner permission. Success, in its deeper sense, is not a coincidence and not simply the result of hard work. It's an expression of inner permission. We can only receive as much success as we and our ancestors allow ourselves to have. When guilt, loss, tragedy, or unacknowledged fates from earlier generations remain unseen, we often hold ourselves back unconsciously. We turn away from success out of love, out of loyalty, out of deep need to belong. But true loyalty does not mean carrying on the suffering. True loyalty means carrying life forward in its fullness. When we honor what was and return the responsibility to where it belongs, can we say inwardly, I am allowed to be successful and I am allowed to receive life in its fullness. And then success can come, gently, naturally, and without struggle. Perhaps this is the most important insight of this episode. Success often has less to do with what we do and much more to do with what we allow inside ourselves. When we hold ourselves back out of unconscious loyalty, we can fight all what we want on the outside. It will always feel as if something is missing. But in the moment we recognize the deeper connection and release the entanglement, success becomes something natural. It can simply flow. And maybe you can already sense this inner success, this allowing is receiving, this quiet I'm allowed is closely connected to something else, to the feeling of self-worth. Because only when we feel worthy can we receive the good that life wants to give us. That is what the next episode is about: self-worth. Why it is so hard for many people to feel it, and how unconscious family bonds can also play a role here. If you like, feel free to subscribe to this channel so you'll be notified as soon as the next episode is released. I look forward to having you with me again. I am Christine Schultheis.